There are very few public figures who can say they've built their legacy with as much sound and fury as Pete Townshend. A virtuoso guitarist, a sharp lyricist, and most importantly, a professional grenade thrower.
You know, both managers suffering from it, but also friends.
Townshend has spent the better part of 6 decades not only setting stages alight with The Who's iconic performances, but also firing off a steady stream of gloriously indiscreet remarks that have left no corner of the rock world unscathed. Diplomacy, you may have gathered, is not his forte. Then again, what would you rather have from the man who once wrote, "Hope I die before I get old"? Platitudes and handshakes. No, Townshend is a man for conflict, for brutal honesty, for saying the thing you'd probably be better off keeping to yourself. From the beginning of his career, Townshend has been a divisive figure, but in fairness,
I hated them all, they hated me. Let's just shut down the conversation.
rock and roll itself was never about making friends. It was about swagger, rebellion, and, let's not sugarcoat it, ego. This is a genre built on larger-than-life personalities clashing and colliding like tectonic plates, and Townshend is an earthquake unto himself. He has spent his career simultaneously shaping the sound of modern music and scowling at his contemporaries. If his tongue has sometimes been sharper than his guitar riffs, it's because that's what rock demands. In the world of overdriven amplifiers and leather trousers, if you don't blow your own horn, someone else will drown you out. Perhaps what makes Townshend so fascinating isn't just the music he's made, but the way he's made it, defiantly, abrasively, and with a level of transparency that borders on masochism. The result is a career littered with cultural touchstones and grudges that, depending on who you ask, are either magnificently petty or perfectly justified. Few artists have been so willing to air their grievances publicly, and even fewer have done so with such theatrical flair. But then, this is Pete Townshend we're talking about, a man for whom restraint might as well be a foreign language. It's important to understand that Townshend's contempt for his contemporaries is not without a certain logic. For someone whose very existence has revolved around innovation, the idea of being lumped in with lesser acts is deeply offensive. Townshend doesn't just want to be respected, he wants to be recognized as singular, as irreplaceable, as the man who changed the course of music history. And to be fair, he's got a point. As the driving force behind The Who, Townshend helped to create the blueprint for modern rock, crafting songs that were as rebellious as they were ambitious. Tracks like My Generation and Baba O'Reilly weren't just hits, they were declarations of intent, sonic manifestos that redefined what a band could be. But let's not pretend Townshend's output exists in a vacuum. His career is inextricably tied to the people he's both admired and loathed over the years. Whether it's Jimmy Page's virtuosity, Ritchie Blackmore's theatrics, or Kurt Cobain's angst, Townshend's rivals have played a crucial role in shaping his legacy. And while most artists are content to pay lip service to their contemporaries, Townshend has always taken a different approach. Why settle for a polite nod when you can hurl a chair instead?
That I dragged round to see Jimmy in the 2 weeks that he did in London were all the same clubs that I'd seen all those people at when I was like 16 years old.
Let's start with Jimmy Page, a man who seems to exist in Townshend's mind as both an undeniable talent and an unbearable show-off. I first saw Jimmy when I was about 14 or 15, Townshend once recalled. He was already in a professional band, and yes, he was extraordinary, but he was also arrogant and flash. You could tell even then that he had a very high opinion of himself. Decades later, this early disdain would resurface as Townshend accused Page and Led Zeppelin of borrowing heavily from The Who's sound. "We sort of invented heavy metal with Live at Leeds," he declared. "We were copied by so many bands, principally by Led Zeppelin." Heavy drums, heavy bass, heavy lead guitar. Now it's worth noting that Townshend's criticism of Zeppelin isn't entirely unfounded. There's no denying the similarities between the two bands, but one suspects that Townshend's real issue isn't the plagiarism so much as the idea that Zeppelin might have outdone him at his own game. After all, Led Zeppelin became one of the biggest bands in the world, eclipsing even The Who in terms of record sales and cultural impact. For a man as fiercely competitive as Townshend, that kind of success must sting. And yet, there's a grudging respect buried beneath the vitriol. Townshend might bristle at Page's antics, but he's never denied the man's talent. Jimmy's a great guitarist, he admitted, but sometimes I wonder if he knows when to stop. If Townshend's feelings toward Page are complicated, his disdain for Ritchie Blackmore is far less ambiguous. As the guitarist for Deep Purple, Blackmore was one of the leading figures in the hard rock movement that dominated the 1970s. But for Townshend, the association was nothing short of insulting. "I hated their music," he said bluntly. "It was very hard to live with, being compared to these very heavy metal bands." And Blackmore? Bash his guitar on his head, smoke a cigarette through his teeth, play a mouth organ backwards. What's that all about? Not my thing, mate. One suspects that Townshend's real gripe isn't with Blackmore's music, but with the spectacle of it all. As someone who's always taken a more cerebral approach to his craft, Townshend has little patience for what he sees as cheap theatrics. But if Townshend's critiques of Page and Blackmore can be chalked up to professional rivalry, his remarks about the Beatles are far more personal. In the mid-1960s, when the Beatles were at the height of their powers, Townshend was quick to dismiss them as overrated. Actually, this afternoon, John Entwistle and I were listening to a stereo LP of the Beatles, he shared in an interview. The voices come out of one side and the backing track comes out of the other. When you hear the backing tracks without their voices, they're flipping lousy. It's a scathing remark, to be sure, but it also speaks to Townshend's obsession with musical authenticity. For him, the idea of a band being praised for their production rather than their playing is anathema. Of course, Townshend's relationship with the Beatles wasn't entirely antagonistic. Over the years, he developed a genuine friendship with George Harrison, and he's spoken fondly of the late guitarist on more than one occasion. But even this goodwill couldn't erase the tension that defined their early interactions. For Townshend, the Beatles were always a reminder of what he wasn't. Universally adored, commercially invincible, and critically untouchable. And while he might have admired their songwriting, he was never going to let that admiration get in the way of a good insult. Fast forward to the 1990s, and Townshend found himself at odds with a new generation of musicians. Among them was Kurt Cobain, the troubled frontman of Nirvana, who inadvertently provoked Townshend's ire with a single line in his journal, "I hope I die before I become Pete Townshend." It was, of course, a cheeky reference to The Who's classic lyric, but Townshend wasn't amused. When reviewing Cobain's journals for The Observer, he described them as the scribblings of a crazed and depressed drug addict. It's a harsh critique, but one that also reveals Townshend's discomfort with being seen as a cautionary tale. For a man who built his career on youthful rebellion, the idea of becoming a symbol of middle-aged malaise must be profoundly unsettling. Even Jimi Hendrix, one of the most universally revered guitarists in history, didn't entirely escape Townshend's ire. To be fair, Townshend has always spoken with admiration of Hendrix's groundbreaking skill. But his respect didn't stop him from resenting the fact that Hendrix frequently overshadowed The Who during shared performances. "What I did for Jimmy, something I always regretted, was give him advice when he first came to London," Townshend recalled. "His manager brought him to meet me, and he asked what equipment to buy. I told him I'd been using this mix of an amp called Sound City, which was a Marshall substitute with an actual Marshall amp. A couple of weeks later, we did a show together, and he was brilliant enough without being 1,000 watts loud. I thought, why did I give him that bloody tip?" In many ways, Townshend's critiques are a reflection of his own insecurities. For all his bravado, there's a vulnerability to his attacks, a sense that he's always measuring himself against those around him. But that's what makes him such a compelling figure. In a world of carefully curated personas, Townshend is unapologetically messy, a man who wears his flaws as proudly as his successes. He might not always be likable, but he's never boring. And in the end, isn't that what rock and roll is all about?